Hello. Recently, I've been having quite a few interactions with people who are concerned that people aren't wearing masks or people are wearing masks. And for whatever reason, this has become a polarized issue in our society. And it's pretty easy to write that off as a political thing where the right has decided that it's a show of cowardice to wear a mask and infringing on freedoms, and the left is saying that you're going to kill us all if you don't wear a mask. And on the surface, that seems like there's some reality to that or some truth to that. In my experience, I've come into contact with many people who are very afraid of becoming sick, coronavirus and other things. And I've also come in contact, many of my clients and patients have a history of trauma and drama. And I don't know what percentage, but a fairly high percentage of my patients have what would probably qualify as PTSD. And it has actually been diagnosed or otherwise just kind of commonly known as the things that would cause that. And so what people haven't considered as much, and it's really kind of come to the forefront in several sessions in the last month or two, is that there's a lot of reasons why we don't do that, and some of those nobody's talking about. For example, there's a psychologist by the name of Stephen Porges, and Stephen Porges came up with this theory called the Polyvagal Theory, which basically means that there's three branches of the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve that essentially integrates all of the function of your organs. And it's a nerve that, when it's dysfunctional, can make your system very upregulated or very downregulated. At its most general, it creates a dysregulation in your body. So from a polyvagal sense, you could have symptoms of ADHD or anxiety or panic, or you could also have symptoms of depression or CPOD or a lack of energy and all those kind of things. In Dr. Porges' theory, humans, this is mainly a human thing, get most of their face-to-face interaction understanding from just a small section of another person's face, basically between the bottom of their mouth and the tops of their eyes. And when you look in this space, it gives you a lot of information on the state of somebody else. You can tell if somebody has facial tension, you can tell if their eyes aren't agreeing with what they're saying, all sorts of things. Those with a trauma background or trauma history most likely at some point started to leverage their understanding of being able to predict when they were in danger. In fact, they've probably elevated their stress response and decreased the amount of actual stimulation needed to categorize something as a threat. And that's really the responsibility of the mind and the brain and the vagus nerve working together. It's more complicated than that, but if you think of it like that, it'll really help your understanding. So if somebody has relied on this idea and they believe that their ability to read other people or to become aware of what somebody is actually meaning by what they say or how they look at you, or everybody knows the mom look. I have the mom look. I can look at somebody. I'm a visual sensory style. So I can look at somebody and they can usually get my meaning just from a look. Some people are auditory and they get that from their ears. But in the people that have become sensitized to their life for some reason, it's usually about safety, and it usually happens very early on. It's not a conscious decision. Then you start to understand that this area of the body is of utmost importance. And most people don't even know that. But all of a sudden, when we're told that we have to be afraid of a virus, and we should be afraid, and you're going to kill people if you don't have a mask, and some of that seems to be, the masks seem to help, right? So there's a level of truth to that as well. But when they're told that, and then they're forced to put on a mask, now what you're doing is saying that I don't value your safety. Now the trouble with all of this is, most of this is at a less than conscious level. And so they can't describe. So the way I came up with this was because the patients that were coming in, or my clients that I was seeing online, that were having issues with masks were not reasonable in any sense, right? So they were caught in the traditional emotional, reactive, non-rational frame of reference. So from my point of view, there's probably not a rational understanding that is devoid of any kind of emotion. I see people who are what people would refer to as rabid anti-maskers, right? And there's hardly ever a coherent logic to that is at least equal to the amount of zest and zeal that people are putting into it, right? So that's a sign that something's happening behind the scenes that we just aren't aware of or we don't know of. So anyway, it may behoove us to understand that covering up the face can really make people uncomfortable, especially if they feel that their safety is predicated on their ability to see what's happening and make judgments to see if there's an alignment of somebody who's asking them to do something or somebody that's approaching them. And often when we can understand why somebody might be doing a behavior, especially when they can't understand that or they haven't understood that yet, it can be really helpful, and it can really bridge a lot of gaps. There's another subset of people who have had, let's say you come from a culture where kidnappings are common, and this happens more frequently in other countries where they're kidnapping people for ransom and things like that. Well, in those populations, people seen in a mask, not usually a good thing. In fact, in just about every population, people who are wearing a mask, it's usually not associated with a good person, right? The good people in the movies generally aren't wearing the masks, unless you're talking about the superheroes that are trying to hide their identity or something like that. But generally, when you see somebody in a mask, the first thing you do is think, what are they hiding? Or why don't they want to be seen, right? And because our threat detectors are going off at the same time. Now, many of us without a trauma background or history, or somebody that doesn't have our sensitivity level cranked way up, might be able to reason our way through that and go, oh, well, that's we're just wearing masks and that's it. And I do remember when I first started wearing masks, when the guidance came out that they might be helpful, probably the first 10 times I went into a store and I saw people wearing handkerchiefs across their mouth or masks coming up their eyes, and they have sunglasses and a hat, I think somebody's in disguise. I think something nefarious is about to happen. And I'm not necessarily predisposed to think that kind of thought. So I guess, long story long, we should probably give people a little bit more compassion and understanding. And it doesn't mean that we should just allow everybody to choose whether they wear a mask or not, especially if they're helpful. But if we keep trying to address the problem on a level above which or below which the problem is actually occurring, it's never going to solve anything. So once we know some of the motivations, well, all of that is governed by the vagus nerve. So there's exercises on our website with stimulating the vagus nerve and resetting the vagus nerve. We're going to come out with a few more exercises that might be helpful. There's ways that we can do this. And so if you're somebody that is afraid, or you notice this resonates with you and say, oh, that's me, well, start to regulate your vagus nerve, which will decrease your sensitivity and your threat detectors, and actually increase the threshold for labeling something as a threat. And then we can start to discuss the issues a little bit more. So please feel free to subscribe and like and do all those kind of things if you want more information, and share with anybody that you feel this might be helpful for. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, please share them down below. Thank you.